We have lots to discuss in today's video, including lots of NHL trade rumors. Tonight's rumors focusing on teams like the Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the New York Rangers, Pittsburgh Penguins, and of course the Vancouver Canucks, Boston Bruins, and a few others. Plus, we have news from the NHL waiver wire, another player on waivers. Here today, we had a big announcement from the NHL as well regarding next year's Winter Classic in not one, but two outdoor games in the state of Florida. Plus, lots of injury updates, and we actually have a game postponed for tonight's schedule. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss here. Today's been a very newsworthy day, all kinds of interesting trade rumors we want to take a look at here in just a couple minutes. But first, we got news today that we actually have a game postponed tonight, and it's a bit of a scary situation, depending on where you live and how closely you follow the news or whatnot. We have a pretty serious situation in California, in the Los Angeles area, with some pretty severe wildfires that are spreading, and lots of homes have been lost, and tons of acres on fire right now. It's a very catastrophic, terrible situation going on out there. And because of that, the Calgary Flames Los Angeles Kings game that was scheduled for this evening has been postponed and will be rescheduled at a later date. I mean, from what I could tell, I don't think there was a case of, where the arena is and Los Angeles and downtown. I don't really think it's in any danger. Like, the fire's a little ways from there, but it's not. All the fires that are going on are close enough that I imagine the air quality and the smoke is probably affecting for quite a range. And I imagine it's, like I said, a terrible situation. So we certainly hope they can get that under control soon enough, and hopefully things can be spared, because there's lots of people losing their homes that have been there forever and a day. So certainly I want to wish them well, and hopefully things can be minimized, but I know it's already at a catastrophic loss. So just want those people, we are certainly thinking of them for sure. Big news from the NHL waiver wire here today. We have yet another player on waivers. Yesterday, we had Dylan Ferguson of the Minnesota Wild, who signed a new contract with the Wild for the remainder of the season. Needed to clear waivers to officially go on to their AHL club, and he did indeed clear. I had made mention some teams that were dealing with goalie injuries, such as Ottawa, maybe might put in a claim, but they did not. So the Wild get to keep Ferguson, and he's been assigned to the Iowa Wild. And then today on waivers, we have Seattle Kraken forward Daniel Sprong. Now, Sprong has been on waivers already this year, originally signed as a free agent with the Vancouver Canucks. Things didn't work out overly well there early in the season. Got put on waivers, went to Seattle, where he actually had played before. Hadn't quite found that success like he had there before. Now he's on waivers again. So far, he's got 5 points this year in 19 NHL games. He does have a lot of teams on his resume now, and he does have a decent amount of goals as well. He had a stretch there where he was bouncing around a lot, but he was producing. I really don't know what the story is with Sprong. I've heard some people say that it could be like off-ice character issues, not good in the room, those types of things. I can't say that with any certainty that that's the case, but he has bounced around a lot. So you do wonder with players like that, what is it that they can't stay consistent? Because there was a point there that seemed like all he did was score. Made you wonder. But we'll see if he gets picked up. I know there's certainly teams that are looking for scoring help. So wouldn't be shocked if he's picked up again, but at the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if he wasn't. Hard to say. I think it could go either way. One scary injury, we had a bunch of them last night, but one of the worst ones was Calgary Flames young forward Connor Zary. Ended up getting in a bad collision with Ducks defenseman Drew Helleson, who was kicked out of the game with a major penalty for kneeing, and it didn't look good at all. Like, Zary's leg and his knee took such a blow. It was not good looking at all. He was in an incredible amount of pain. The update that came today was that they're still kind of waiting for the swelling to subside a bit. They're going to hopefully by tomorrow get more imaging to get a better idea where things were at. I think structurally it looked like it wasn't quite as bad as it could have been. But it looked terrible, so I don't know. Maybe he'll escape this with a less severe injury than it looked like. But it wasn't good. Hellison's not going to be facing any additional supplemental discipline by the looks of it. But yeah, Zary certainly in our thoughts as well after a terrible looking injury. Hopefully we'll get a better update tomorrow, and maybe it won't be as bad, but it looked terrible. Some other roster moves here today as well. Sticking with the Ducks, they have also recalled right winger Sam Colangelo. The Minnesota Wild today put Jacob Blanco on LTIR retroactive to December the 14th. Brock Faber was another one that went down injured last night. They had to recall David Yurchak on an emergency basis, so he's called up finally as well. And the Columbus Blue Jackets also had Sean Monahan injured his wrist last night. He looks like he's going to be missing some time, probably a couple of weeks, but we don't have a firm update on that just yet. And they've also recalled Luca Delbel-Belize. And Vancouver, they get an update on defenseman Phil Hronek, who's been sent down to the American Hockey League, to their Abbotsford affiliate on a conditioning stint, but this is not a case of Hronek going to play American Hockey League games. The team is going to be away on a road trip for a bit, and this is an opportunity for him to continue on the ice and actually getting in practices rather than skating on his own. Or sometimes you get small groups of injured players or extras that are left behind, but in Hronek's case, it just makes more sense for him to go down and practice. Certainly not a case of him getting into AHL games. Josh Morrissey, also the Winnipeg Jets, was another name to watch who was injured last night. Don't have an update yet on what kind of timelines or anything like that, but he was also hurt. Could be certainly a bad loss as well for the Winnipeg Jets. Now, as I mentioned, we got some big announcements here today from the NHL on some outdoor games. We talked before, there's been speculation from a couple of reputable insiders saying that Florida would indeed get at least one NHL outdoor game next season, and now that's been confirmed. They are getting two, the Panthers and the Lightning, which was what we discussed as the rumored situation in the last couple of weeks. That is indeed going down. The Florida Panthers game is going to be on January 2nd. So, this year they had it on New Year's Eve, which wasn't good. They've done it on New Year's Day before. Obviously, they're trying not to, compete with football, essentially, but they also don't want to compete with themselves. New Year's Eve was just too much of a busy day in the NHL, in my opinion. But the Winter Classic is going to be held in southern Florida and Miami, which is kind of weird when you think about it, but hopefully they can pull it off and have good ice down there. So they're going to be doing it at the baseball stadium where the Marlins play. So it's going to be the Florida Panthers against the New York Rangers. Now, I know a lot of people said it'd be nice to see the two Florida teams do battle against each other. Obviously, for right now, they're each getting their own game. So if you do, one, you'd have to do the other. Maybe do like a rivalry series, if you will. But I guess they're going this route instead. Because those two teams, when they do play, especially a couple times they met in the playoffs, has been pretty nasty. And there certainly is history there now. But, we'll see. So the Panthers host the Rangers in the Winter Classic next year in Miami, and then on February the 1st, the Stadium Series will be going to Tampa, and the Tampa Bay Lightning will play host to the Boston Bruins, and they will be playing in the Buccaneers football stadium, RJ Stadium. So, of course, that's a pretty big venue there as well. So Tampa and Miami both getting NHL outdoor games. Of course, both have had a lot of success in that state. I'm sure it's going to have its challenges to have good ice and everything. I'd be really curious to see how things go on that front. The Montreal Canadiens, Ken Hughes spoke to the media today and did confirm that there's no chance that we see youngster Ivan Demidov join the Montreal Canadiens before the end of their season. There were some that thought maybe, especially if the Habs if they made the playoffs, and right now they've played well in the last 10 games. They're 8-2. They've gotten themselves back into the race here. They did hold down the playoff spot for one day, I think it was. But then, of course, now they're off for 3 or 4 days, which is what happened with Ottawa before that. Ottawa had the spot, and then they had a bunch of days off. Teams caught up. Then they lost the game, and then it's kind of, got a big mishmash of teams that are all jumbled together there within like a point or two of each other. It's going to be quite a race by the looks of it. Teams will have to keep up or they're going to fall out. So for right now, the Habs are back in it. If they thought maybe, a lot of fans were saying if they make the playoffs and if they win a round or something, could Demidov join them? And the answer by Ken Hughes is no. There was some talk saying that KHL contracts, I believe, were extended until the end of May. So that obviously will play a role, but there's no chance Demidov will be joining Montreal this year. Ken Hughes did say when he went to go watch him play, that it was really just a case of being able to watch him in person. which is something he hadn't had the chance to do yet. So clearly they had a chance to look at some other prospects there as well. So Demidov not going to the Canadiens this year, will join them, hopefully sign in the summer and be there for next season. Now, as I mentioned, all kinds of rumors around different trade stuff, and the expectation around, according to NHL insiders, is that with the NHL experiencing a couple of weeks break in February for the Four Nation Faceoff, that there's belief that teams are going to probably want to ramp up some trade activity before that break kicks in, because once the break is over, there's not a lot of runway to the NHL trade deadline. There's only, you're going to have a handful of games towards the end of February, 1st of March, and then boom, you're at the deadline. So, it's quite reasonable to expect some teams to start looking to get their business done before that break. So probably, we're not quite the middle of January yet. We approach the early part of February before they shut down for the Four Nations, that we could see some interesting activity. So one thing to watch is, according to Elliotte Friedman, the New York Rangers have given defenseman Zach Jones permission to speak to other teams. We know he's been a healthy scratch for a number of games. He's spoken out, been frustrated, would like a chance to play. After they made some moves and acquired Vakanainen, it seemed like he kind of bumped him out of Jones' spot, and he can't get back into the lineup now. So considering the Bruins decor is pretty much in flux here, and in the case of retooling that completely, I think it's going to look very, very different next year. We've heard speculation not just about Jones, but we know Ryan Lindgren's a pending UFA. We know that K'Andre Miller is potentially on the block, and obviously they already moved Jacob Trouba. Will Borgen, who was acquired, may not stick around. So, they're going to probably have a very different looking blue line next year. So at this point, Jones does have permission to speak to other teams. He's, confident that he's a capable player, of at the very least being a third pair guy. We'll see if they find a new home for him sometime soon. Friedman also talked about the Pittsburgh Penguins here, saying that the Penguins have made it clear to other teams across the NHL that they're pretty much wide open for business, that they have a number of forwards, defensemen, and goaltenders that are available for trade, specifically ones that are kind of on shorter-term contracts. So we're looking at Marcus Pettersson, we're looking at Cody Glass, Anthony Beauvillier. They are open, I think, to moving either goalie, especially Tristan Jarry, if they can find, as much as, he's had his moments where he's played better, but I still don't think they're crazy with the long-term contract they gave him. Which is not that long ago, but I think they're having buyer's regrets in that sense, keeping them around on the term that they were able to give out. So even though the Penguins are in the mix for playoffs, you got to look at the fact that they've also, I know for a while there when the Senators were holding on a spot, the Penguins were the next ones on their heels, but they've also played more games. They're definitely not contenders. So I don't think they're going to be in a situation to do anything major subtractions. But any of the, players that are less likely to be returning next year that are not as big of a name, I would say are pretty good chance still go if they can find an opportunity. Now, lots of talk around Vancouver, Toronto. Let's start with the Canucks. We've heard before about the rejected trade that was speculated, which actually came from Josh Yeo, the Penguins writer for The Athletic, saying that it was Mika Zibanejad was offered by the Rangers for JT Miller, and that the Canucks rejected it. Now, Elliotte Friedman chimed in on this today, saying he does believe that there is a lot of truth to that, but he does not believe that it was a one-for-one deal. He says that Zibanejad was definitely on the table, but things never reached a point where the Rangers went and spoke to Zibanejad about waiving his no-move clause. Clearly, if the Canucks rejected the deal, and obviously nothing was accepted, nothing moved forward, but because of that, the Rangers never spoke to Zibanejad. So that much we can confirm. It never got to a point that he was consulted about waiving. So with that in mind, Friedman says that one player that the Canucks really like on the Rangers is Braden Schneider. Now, he's one of the very few defensemen, along with Adam Fox, that has not been mentioned in the rumor mill for possibly being traded. They're pretty much the only ones, I think, that are, preferred for the Rangers to keep. So clearly, if the Rangers are going to continue to come hard after Miller, he likely is going to have to be included if they want to get anything done. Now, Friedman does go on to say that, that the deal for JT Miller going to the Rangers, he wouldn't call it a dead deal. It still has a chance to happen, but the Rangers are going to have to change the offer. And as I mentioned in the last couple of times we've talked about this, Mika Zibanejad for JT Miller, I can understand why Vancouver rejects that deal. But if the Rangers want to continue to pursue JT, they're going to have to increase the offer. And a guy like Schneider or Lafreniere would have to be the names that are put on the table, or they're not going to end up getting themselves a deal done. Now, when it comes to Elias Pettersson, belief is that, Rick Dhaliwal was saying that if they are going to consider trading him, they're probably going to want a deal similar to what we saw the Buffalo Sabres get for Jack Eichel, maybe even a little bit more, to be honest, considering that Jack Eichel was technically what you want to consider damaged goods, had a serious injury at the time of the trade that required what we kind of refer to as experimental surgery. And, well, obviously everything's worked out just fine. He's now a Stanley Cup champion with the Vegas Golden Knights. But there had to be some level of risk and concern that the Golden Knights were willing to accept to make that deal. And they still gave up a top first-round drafted prospect, a decent roster player who can play in your middle six-of-your lineup, and a first-round pick and a second-round pick. So the Sabres got a good haul in return. So with Pettersson being healthy and a former 100-point producer, you have to think they should be able to get the same deal, if not better. So, there you go. That's kind of what they're have in mind here. So clearly, there's teams that are looking to up the ante. A couple of teams that we have heard that were not discussed prior, Dhaliwal mentions a team to absolutely watch, and any kind of Pettersson movement would be the Columbus Blue Jackets. Don Waddell definitely has some level of interest, and they also have the young players, prospects, and picks to put together a very intriguing package. Now, I don't know if they would consider trading Kent Johnson or Adam Fantilli, but they have those types of players on the roster. They have more very interesting prospects on the way. They have draft capital, so they have a lot of options they could do to really make it intriguing for the Canucks to consider moving Pettersson to the Jackets. I know there's another article on RG.com from Marco D'Amico saying that he's got sources confirming 100% to him that the Bruins have had talks as well with the Canucks when it comes to one or both of these players. It wasn't quite clear exactly who they were targeting, but based on the team and based on where things are trending, it would make a lot more sense if it were Pettersson, not JT Miller. I believe that he said, if you're looking at a Jack Eichel type of trade, you're probably looking at a player like Mason Lohrei, who has certainly top 4D potential, a middle six forward, maybe like a Pavel Zacha, somebody along those lines. And then you're looking at a couple of high picks and prospects to go as well. So you're looking at 4 to 5 pieces if the Bruins were going to stand any chance to get it done. But there is enough sources indicating that the Bruins are absolutely having conversations. You have to think that the Bruins, who have lost 5 straight and have been getting a lot of boos in their own arena. I believe there was even a fire Sweeney chant going at the last Bruins game, a delay loss against the Edmonton Oilers here. That maybe they've already played the coaching card. They've already got rid of Jim Montgomery, who clearly wasn't the problem. He's certainly had a great positive impact on the Blues. But at this point, you have to think that the Bruins at this point are now looking towards a big trade to do something. If they really think they're going to need to be a playoff team, a trade's going to have to be in the works. At this point, the Bruins technically have more points than some of the other Atlantic Division teams. The ones breathing down their neck are Tampa, followed by Ottawa, followed by Montreal, followed by Detroit, and they're all kind of crunched together, and they've all got games in hand on the Bruins, and there's not much of a point spread. It's reasonable to think that the Bruins' losing streak were to go on for 2 or 3 more games. They could slip from 3rd all the way down to 7th. It's not that crazy to see. So, will that be coming next as a big trade in order to shake things up? We'll have to wait and see. So the new intel today, like I said, from Dhaliwal saying what team to watch on Pettersson would be Columbus. We've heard from, like I said, Marco D'Amico saying that the Bruins are definitely in the conversation. I saw Stefan Rosner of the Hockey News indicating that the Islanders were definitely in the mix there as well. So again, we've heard before, but maybe, would they move Noah Dobson? Would they move Matthew Barzal? I don't see them moving Barzal, but they have some interesting pieces there. They might struggle for the supplemental pieces to add to it though. Dobson, I think they would really like, but beyond that, what do they have that they would want? It's going to be tough for them to put together a package, but there's definitely interest. There's no doubt. So multiple teams in there. Then, of course, you get the whole Pettersson to the Rangers thing, which according to Friedman is not dead. And we'll see if they try to revive it. If there's any way the Rangers consider putting Lafreniere or Schneider in any deal, which is hard to imagine they would right now, but you just never know. They've played a little bit better as of late. We'll see if Chris Drury has any patience or what he's up to next. And then Toronto, Darren Dreger and Elliot Friedman both have made comments here on the Leafs situation. Friedman made mention that the Leafs definitely want to add down the middle, ideally a 3C or somebody who can play in the middle six. Probably a 3, but somebody who can be a good 2 as well, and they have more flexibility in how they do their lineup. So a solid middle 6 centerman, really, at the end of the day, is what they're looking for. That is their top priority. And there's also speculation, according to Friedman, that the Leafs are very, very likely at this point, considering how well he's played, that extending John Tavares is a much more likelihood at this point. He's had a real good season. He's responded very well to Craig Berube's coaching and style of play, and they're quite happy there. So I think he's definitely going to be extending. We don't know the exact terms, but expect something to get done there. And Stephen Lawrence as well, who's fit in nicely in the bottom 6. Also, according to Friedman, is expected to likely come to terms in the not too distant future on a bit of an extension as well. But in Toronto, besides that, they're obviously looking at help down the middle. That's what we're looking for now. Darren Dreger, TSN on Insider Trading, he listed a bunch of centers that they have on their kind of wish list here that they're taking looks at. The top of that list was Ryan O'Reilly, former St. Louis Blues captain, of course, who won the Cup with Leaf head coach Craig Berube. Now in Nashville in a frustrating situation. We know the Predators are pretty much wide open and ready to do a variety of things. I don't think at the beginning of the year they would have set out thinking we're going to trade O'Reilly this year. But in a lot of ways, amongst all the names that were mentioned for the Leafs, he was by far the player that checks the most boxes and makes the most sense. Now, we know he was there obviously last year before he signed with the Nashville Predators. Clearly, at this point, O'Reilly is a player that I didn't really seem like he wanted to stay in Toronto when he was there. I do wonder if that might have had more to do with the coaching situation. You have to think the fact that Craig Berube is coaching there now and he won with him in St. Louis, you got to think that probably changes things for O'Reilly, right? I mean, he is by far the best option amongst who's out there and available. So with the season getting off the rails for the Predators, you have to think they're willing to listen on just about everybody. Other names mentioned that the Leafs could be looking at as well would include Yanni Gourde. He's probably the second best option of the Kraken on this list. Other names mentioned include Ryan Strome of the Ducks, Nick Bukestad as well of Utah, Scott Lawton of the Flyers. All names under heavy consideration by Toronto to fill that middle 6 center role. But it seems like, really if you had to ask, O'Reilly is by far the top of the list and the player that makes the most sense. Well, time will tell if they'll get a deal done and bring him back for a second time. His old buddy Luke Schenn is also there. They could use a blue liner. Could we see a package deal with O'Reilly and Schenn going back to the Leafs from Nashville? To be completely honest, that would not be shocking news at all. Now, what would the Leafs have to give up in that case? It's hard to say. You got to think a player like a Nick Robertson would be included. And clearly, some other future-based prospects or whatnot. I don't know if they would they move Easton Cowan? I know he didn't have a great World Juniors, but they're probably not going to give up on that kid that early. You wouldn't think. There's Fraser Minton. There's other draft picks. Like, what do they include here? I don't know that they'd want to take a lot off the roster, but certainly interesting to note and see where things go. But could O'Reilly and or Schenn make it back to Toronto for, in the case of O'Reilly, round 2, in the case of Schenn, round 3 at this year's deadline? Is Nashville's lack of success going to be what Toronto needs to cash in and bring these guys back? We'll have to wait and see where it goes. They'd be terrific complementary players to a really solid group that's playing well for head coach Craig Berube, though. We'll see what happens. Let me know your thoughts on all this and more down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.